Os! Welcome back to the Singing Samurai. Today's video is on how do I get my students to tell the truth. Do I mean like how do I get them to tell me honestly if they've practiced? No. Do I mean how do I get them to tell me honestly if they learned their music? Absolutely not. Because we know the answers to those things. If they've practiced, it will be apparent. If they've learned their music, they will be better at it than the week before. That stuff is pretty obvious. Now, what I'm talking about is the deep stuff. The connecting this to what they're singing about. Honestly, to tell the truth, to really express themselves fully. How do we get them to do that? That's a big topic. And actually, this is going to be the first video in a series within the teaching series. It's a series within a series. Stick around, find out more. Okay, so it's a series within a series. It's this, how do I get them to tell the truth? Good, it's a huge thing. It's a huge thing. It's a huge thing to consider. There are a bunch of different parts, and I'll try and overview them in this one, and then we'll break them down in the next couple of videos. It starts with vulnerability. We have to be really vulnerable in the studio. That means that we have to be vulnerable as teachers. So that's a thing. You have to create the environment like that. I have to create the environment in my studio to make sure that my students feel safe to be vulnerable or to fully be themselves. Maybe it's another way of thinking about it. But then with them, how do we get them to do that? Well, a big part of that is they have to figure out who they are. So this is not necessarily something that we can solve at all, and certainly not something that we can solve quickly, and it's not necessarily something that we need to solve. It's something that really our students need to solve, but we do need to help them and to facilitate that. And then there are other things to consider, like the external pressures. It's like you got to be conscientious and follow the rules and fit with society, and you don't want to stand out, and you don't want to be too expressive with your emotions. And it's like, the mom running around with their kids, you're being too loud. Don't fight with your brother or sister. In school too, we get it too. It's like, someone makes you mad, we talk about it calmly. And look, and that's a healthy thing. Like, I'm not saying that it's bad to be conscientious or follow the rules, or it's bad to keep yourself in check and not just to be this flailing emotional human being that just can't control their emotions. But if you want to be a performing artist, especially as a singer, at least I think especially as a singer, because I am a singer, other performing artists might say, hey, that's my problem too. But if you want to be a singer and you want to be a performing artist, you have to learn how to really let those emotions out and quickly and easily. But I have to all of a sudden let all of these emotions out around complete strangers most of the time. Like, that's a bit of a mind warp. It's like, geez. So it's challenging. Another thing to consider is that, again, like I said this in other videos, we are not therapists. I am not a therapist. I'm not trained to be a therapist. I don't want the responsibility of being a therapist. But there are things about being a teacher that kind of run parallel to being a therapist. One of them is that because of this nature of really fully expressing those emotions and telling that truth, that's a long game. I was just talking to my buddy, Dr. Joseph Bonick, and I was asking him about this, and he said, yeah, no, we're playing a long game. And I like that. It is. It's a very long game. It's like chess, or golf. It's not, this is not going to be solved quickly. And so we have to develop that relationship with our student, and we have to develop the trust with them and the routine with them. And they have to feel vulnerable and safe. And well, when you do that with somebody, with anybody, they're going to start sharing things with you that are really personal. And that's helpful and it's important and it's good. All of those things are good. But then, because we're caring teachers, like I want to help them with those problems. And to an extent, yes, that's a good thing, like you would with anybody else. You want to help them, you want to offer, I don't know, some advice or some perspectives on things. But ultimately our job is to teach them how to sing. And I get stuck in this too. And I even asked Joe, I said, what do you do? Where do you draw the line between being, a teacher and a therapist? Like at what point? And one of the things we talked about is, we know that there are some folks out there that just like, they have this approach of, well, it's time to sing. You got to sing, and we don't have time to deal with these concerns or these issues. And like that's valid. There's merit to that. Like your voice lesson, you got to sing. But then, like if you come to your lesson and you're just tied up in emotional knots, it's easy for someone to say, "Dance, monkey." It's easy to say that. And it is a professional expectation. You're out there. It doesn't matter what's going on in your life. You got to show up and you got to do your job. Yes. But they're not professionals. Most of my students are not professionals. So that doesn't really work for me. I can't say that. But then at the same time, it's like I can't have a student come to a lesson 5 weeks in a row and just talk about their issues. Then I'm a therapist? I'm not a therapist. I don't want to be a therapist. We're not singing. And yet, if sometimes people do need to talk, and if they don't have a therapist, but they trust us, the teacher, they can be vulnerable, and that's kind of what happens. And sometimes that needs to happen, in my opinion. I don't know. Some people might think, oh, that's crazy. No, don't. You don't need to let them talk out their problems in their voice lesson. Sometimes I think that that's exactly what needs to happen, and it's because, again, we're building that relationship. And if I make my students feel like they can't fully be themselves, in their day-to-day life when they come to their lesson, and then there's all this pressure and all this fear and worry of like I have to be great in my lesson, otherwise my teacher's going to be upset with me. I don't know. That might work for some folks. Some students might be able to like separate that, but like I can't separate that. I can't go into my lesson and feel like I have to be another person or part of myself and hide the rest of me, and then be in a situation where I have to be fully expressive. Like I just can't do that, And so how could I expect that of my students? I think we need to be very comfortable with encouraging students to go to therapy if it's something that they need. And I don't know. I don't know if it's reasonable for me to say this. It might just be my experience. But I think that therapy is a really great tool for everyone. And I think that there are potentially issues for everyone to gain something by talking to a trained therapist. It doesn't have to be so taboo, and it is kind of still really oddly taboo. It's like, I don't want to talk about I'm in therapy. Well, it's like the same thing you do with your friends, except your friend is trained. They're not really your friend, so they can tell you the truth, and they can give you some guidance. It's a wonderful thing. And ultimately, these issues that students will have, they need to deal with a therapist. So I think that that's a good overview for this issue of telling the truth. I think that the best thing to do in the beginning is to really work on establishing that relationship with your student, and the balance between being the authority, being the person that says, I'm here to tell you what you need to do to get better, and also establishing, hey, I'm a human being too, and I have faults too, and I don't know everything, and we're here together to make, to walk this path together. I think that it's really important to strike that balance. We can't completely lose our authority as a teacher to make our students feel comfortable. But at the same time, we can't be such an authority that we feel like a tyrant. I think it's really, really important to establish that balance. And again, like I said in the last video, to make sure that we're aware of the fact that our students are coming in with a great deal of worry and anxiety and pressure in the first couple lessons of like, am I even good enough to sing? Should I even be studying voice at all? Am I good enough to study with this teacher? Whether that's reasonable for them to worry about or not, it's there. And so, we have to be really careful with that balance. But I also think there's this, I touched on it before, but there's this interesting, how do you put it? I don't know, it's okay, COVID brain. I think it's like, I want to be, my students are never comfortable in their lessons totally, and I think that that's important because a little bit of discomfort means that you're growing. You're being pushed in some way. And that is very, very much in line with Aikido. Os, I will endure while being pushed. There needs to be a push. But then as teachers, we also need to be pushed. And if we don't allow our students to challenge us and we don't put ourselves in a position to be challenged by them, if we're just so much the authority that we're comfortable, it's like, yes, I taught good lessons today because I was never uncomfortable, is a really subtle, dangerous, tempting place to be. Because if we're always comfortable and we're never in that position that we want our students to be, of being pushed, they'll pick up on it. Probably not even consciously. Maybe some of them will pick up on it consciously, and they'll never tell us. But it'll be there. So it's like expecting them to do something that we're not doing. And I don't think that that's conscious. I've fallen into that myself, more than once. And then I realized, I thought about it. Why do we do that? Why do I do that anyway? We don't get that positive affirmation from our students that we're doing a good job. So we get that when they perform, which, some students, they're performing all the time. So that's great. A lot of the students, it's, especially like in high school, it's like you got the high school musical and you got solo and ensemble. And, some high schools, if you're lucky, they have 2 musicals, usually not. And then there might be like the occasional solo or something they get to sing. So it's like 2 or 3 times out of the year, you get some external feedback that they're singing well. So that's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to be in that position. It's uncomfortable to feel like, am I not doing a good job? Maybe I'm not doing a good job. Even though you see them getting better, it's like, but maybe I'm not doing a good job because we're not getting that feedback. And so I think it's easy, definitely for me, to slip into this desire to feel comfortable as a teacher. And the way that it's easy to feel comfortable, I think, as a teacher, or 2 ways, is either to not have a lot of expectations so that I'm not popping balloons, or not say things that I know are going to cause my students to be potentially frustrated or insecure or what have you. Or the opposite, where it's just like, this is what you need to do, and this is why you need to do it, and so go and do it. I'm the authority, I'm the teacher. It doesn't necessarily feel like tyrannical or mean or anything like that, but it's like, wow, yeah, I said the right things, that was a good lesson, their head is spinning, now they're stressed out, good, they should go and work on that stuff. And sometimes it is good to give them a little boot in the butt, say, go get some work done. But again, what I'm circling around is that idea of balance. And in order for it to be balanced, I think we need to feel uncomfortable as teachers too, in the same way that we're making our students feel a little uncomfortable. Like, we need to be pushed by them as we are pushing them. And this goes into Aikido and how Aikido helps with that situation. Again, shite and uke. Shite on balance, uke off balance, but these roles switch back and forth so that we understand each side. We understand what it's like to be on balance and off balance, and what it's like for our partner to be the one who's on balance, and then for our partner to be the one that's off balance, and that relationship going back and forth, builds a lot of empathy and compassion, and both people are uncomfortable. Both people get to feel solid and on balance, and then not solid and off balance. And so I think it helps to normalize that feeling and to make it maybe not so scary, in the sense that it's okay to be uncomfortable and to be pushed and to see what we can improve upon. And it's very ego crushing, which is a good thing. Again, the first video, right? We got to be very mindful of our ego. And so one of my litmus tests for me in determining am I creating a vulnerable enough environment for my students is, am I uncomfortable on some level? Like, am I being pushed to be a better teacher every lesson? Or am I getting stuck in just being the authority? Or the other, am I being pushed appropriately, or am I removing expectations enough so that I don't feel like I am making people unhappy because I don't get a lot of positive feedback because I'm the teacher? It's just not the nature of things. We don't really get it that often. The other thing I'll say about Aikido too, and kind of wrap this first video up, is that the same thing happens on the mat. The same thing happens on the mat. If I'm angsty, I'm feeling aggressive or frustrated, don't have a lot of control going on in my personal life, I will take that out on my partner on the mat. It's not intentional, like at all. I don't mean to. It just happens. Or if I'm really, really happy, it's like that's going to impact my training too. Sometimes to not a good benefit, sometimes to a great benefit. Sometimes it makes just the training that day super fun. Sometimes when the training needs to be really focused and I'm like, blah, 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 I'm so happy. It's like, okay, it wasn't really the most effective training. But again, it's that balance, and it's that same balance that we seek in the studio. It's the same balance that we seek on the mat. And then as a teacher, when I've taught things in Aikido, it's the same relationship. It's another human being, full of emotions and fears and worries and dreams and hopes and excitement. And you can't expect people to just separate that out and study pure technique, because it doesn't work that way. In my experience, most people can't do that, and it's also then meaningless. What's the point? What's the point of training in Aikido, or what's the point of learning how to be a singer if it's not about becoming a better version of ourselves, about being fully us and expressing that, and working on our inner demons, and so again, just to circle back, we have to be human too. We have to be vulnerable too. We have to be uncomfortable too as teachers, so that our students can feel safe doing the same and doing what we ask of them. We have to do it. We have to do it. The Yata no Kagami, the mirror, we have to be a reflection of the partner that we want to train with. We have to be as open with them as we want them to be with us. And it's tricky because we're the authority, so it's kind of a crummy situation to be in to a certain extent. But then we also get to see the growth, the change in the student that they accomplish for themselves. We just pointed in the right direction, helped them along, and that's pretty cool. It's worth it. That's worth it. All right, so that's part one. Stay tuned for the next couple of things I talked about. We'll go into more detail with those things. But, in the meantime, in your own studios, just practice that. If you're finding your students are really struggling, especially during all of this craziness with coronavirus, that they're really struggling to express themselves, be more vulnerable with them. Express your own feelings and emotions and thoughts and worries a little bit. Don't burden them, because your job is to teach them to sing, of course. But share it with them so they know you're a human too. You're not just an authority on singing. See what happens. Or even don't necessarily even think, you don't have to share that stuff. Just feel that way. Remind yourself that you're a human being when they come into the studio, as you're reminding them that they're a human being when they come into the studio, and see what changes. As my dear friend Lewis says, don't believe me, Just go and do it and see if it works. It's true. I think it's a great philosophy. Thank you very much. Os!